on CNN.
Well, Russia's invasion of Ukraine in its second month, scores of civilians dead, entire cities flattened, and perhaps most troubling, no end in sight, at least not yet. I'm Becky Anderson. Hello and welcome back to Connect the World. It's been another day of intense Russian airstrikes on Ukraine. This is video of smoke rising around the capital, Kyiv, where our CNN crew has been hearing explosions throughout the day. We'll get a live report from Kyiv in just a moment for you. The mayor of Irpin, a suburb of Kyiv, telling CNN Ukrainian forces have retaken that city. CNN cannot independently verify that claim. An advisor to Ukraine's president reporting attacks on cities in the northeast and in the northwest of the country, and claiming Mariupol now faces carpet bombing. A new video from there shows residents returning to their destroyed homes. Ukraine's president describing what has happened to Mariupol as a humanitarian catastrophe. The mayor today saying his city is, quote, in the hands of the occupiers. France's foreign minister comparing conditions there to what happened during Syria's war. Have a listen.
You can see Mariupol as a second Aleppo, and there will be collective guilt if we don't do anything. Mariupol is siege warfare.
You see Mariupol as a second Aleppo, he said. And with Russia's drive to capture the capital stalled, the head of Ukraine's military intelligence speculating, at least, that Russian President Vladimir Putin could now be looking to carve the country in two, like North and South Korea. Well, as Ukrainian troops fight to hold the line around the capital, local officials there say kids are going to go back to school, though it will be online, not in person. The city also loosening its curfew a bit. CNN's Fred Pleitkin has the view from the capital of Kyiv for you.
Hi, Becky. Yeah, there's a lot going on in the Ukrainian capital, and it's really been happening throughout the entire night, the morning, and then into the afternoon hours as well, as we've heard very heavy shelling, a lot heavier than we did throughout the course of the entire weekend. Also, air raid sirens going off frequently, and just those thuds that you hear constantly here in the Ukrainian capital. And there's plumes of smoke, especially over the northwestern districts of the city. Of course, there you have that district that we keep talking about called Irpin, where a lot of the fighting seems to be concentrated. The Ukrainians in the past have said that they control about 80% of that area after pushing Russian forces out, but that they are still being shelled there. And, you know, from what we've seen, there really are a lot of smoke plumes over that area, and some pretty big noises coming from there as well. The spokesman for the Ukrainian army is saying, you know, that the Russians seem to have launched somewhat of a small counteroffensive, trying to take some towns, some smaller villages, and some streets. But so far, he says that the Ukrainian military is holding them up. The deputy defense minister said that she believes that the Russians are trying to create corridors around the city, which seems to mean they're still trying to encircle the Ukrainian capital, obviously so far not having very much success at that. And then you have the Ukrainian president who came out and said that apparently dress or ceremonial uniforms were found with the Russians, seeming to indicate that they were preparing for some sort of victory parade here in Kyiv. Obviously, that's not something that's going to happen anytime soon. So far, the defenses of the city holding up, and the Ukrainians saying they are on a counteroffensive, Becky.
Well, that's Fred's reporting from the capital. I want to get you a view of the damage just south of where Fred is. ITV's Rohit Katru reports from a town that has been obliterated by Russian strikes.
Shevchenko survived, but not much else did. A statue of the Ukrainian poet still stands after almost everything else was wiped out by a Russian airstrike. The library was hit. Residents take the books they might have once borrowed. The town hall was destroyed too, and the shop for kids, and the pharmacy, and even the off-license. Bishiv is a village 1 hour from Kyiv, and it tells two stories. The crater reveals the force of Russian might. But there's a story of failure too. More than a month into this war, life of sorts carries on. The Russian troops never arrived, although plans were laid to stop them getting in.
It looks like an earthquake hit. There is complete destruction absolutely everywhere. But maybe the most interesting thing to see is not the fact this place was flattened, but the fact it wasn't flattened into submission.
In the capital, monuments are being protected as history is rewritten. Because, met with a fierce resistance, Moscow now says it no longer wants to focus on the capital. But the Ukrainians don't believe that.
We cannot trust them. At the moment, we don't see any withdrawal of Russian troops from certain areas of Kyiv.
Because you needn't go far from Kyiv to see the area around it was in Russia's sights until not long ago. And the strategists protecting the capital believe nothing has changed. Rohit Kachru, ITV News, Bishiv.
Well, the capital, Kyiv itself, easing its curfew. However, the city of Zaporizhia in the southwest part of Ukraine effectively under lockdown. CNN's Ivan Watson got access to that city to see how police are enforcing what is a daytime curfew.
This is a checkpoint at the entrance to the eastern Ukrainian city of Zaporizhia. But this is an unusual day. The government has imposed a citywide daytime curfew. Traffic is not being allowed in or out. And we're getting a look with the local police force at how they're enforcing this emergency curfew. I'm getting a tour of the city with two local police inspectors. We have passed many deployed Ukrainian soldiers. We cannot show them or film them for their safety, given that there is a full-fledged war taking place in this country. What is striking about this daytime curfew is that a city of nearly 1 million inhabitants is now a complete ghost town.
My name is Roman, Panchenko Roman. I'm Ukrainian. I serve in police for already 6 years. I like my work. I'm proud of my work. In the territory of the city, only policemen and some military men. Every car which goes to the city is checked.
The police say it's easier to maintain security and search for suspected Russian collaborators when the city is locked down. How far away is the Russian army right now from where we are?
Russian army is several fronts, but the nearest place where Russian tanks are dislocated is maybe 30 kilometers from this place.
A half hour by car.
Yes, you're right.
Would you defend Zaporizhia if the Russian army comes here? I mean, you're not soldiers, you're police. Would you fight?
I'm a man. I am a Ukrainian man. As for me, it's very ashamed for a man not to protect his family, not to protect his house, not to protect his life.
The people here know what happened to other Ukrainian cities and towns that have been attacked by the Russian military. They don't want that to happen here, but they say if it does, they're ready.
Ivan Watson reporting for you. Right. Away from Ukraine, European Union interior ministers have been arriving in Brussels. They are set to discuss EU coordination of what is this steady stream of refugees leaving Ukraine. And as you will be well aware, we are talking about millions. According to the UN, more than 3.8 million people have now fled the country since this war started February the 24th. When you add to that the number of internally displaced people, an estimated 10 million have now been forced from their homes, a quarter of Ukraine's population. Well, lives are at stake? That's the bottom line, as Ukraine's leaders gear up for another round of talks with Moscow. Those are happening on Tuesday in Istanbul. Ukrainian President Zelensky has said Ukraine is ready to accept neutral, non-nuclear status. He has also said that he is prepared to talk to President Putin himself. That invitation for talks, though, from Putin is not forthcoming at this point. When will this devastating war on Ukraine end, and how? Our international diplomatic editor, Nick Robertson, is there in Brussels for you. On the ground, Russians say that they no longer want to focus on the capital, although the evidence is that they are still intent on an assault there. But they intend to focus fully on the east of the country. Now, we've got, effectively, we understand what the Ukrainian position is at this point. What does that focus on the east suggest about how President Putin's negotiators might position themselves at these upcoming talks in Turkey on Tuesday?
The two sides are still far apart, Becky. If we take at face value what the Russians are saying is, at the very least, they're intending to keep forces on the ground in Ukraine. Intelligence officials in Ukraine, Ukrainian intelligence officials, believe that Russia's sort of trying to separate, at the very least, the north from the south of the country. In the areas that Russia's taken control of in the south, they're putting in parallel governments with their own set of officials. According to Ukrainians, the Russians will only allow people to use Russian currency. So the Ukrainians feel that Russia's already trying to create a separate state there. So that's how the Ukrainians view the Russian position. The Russian position, as you say, they are articulating as they're focusing on the east. It's understood they've wanted and they're trying to get this land corridor to link Crimea in the south to Russia in the east. The Ukrainian position is, as you said, President Zelensky says, look, we will consider a non-nuclear neutral position. However, he wants security guarantees and is certainly looking at NATO and European nations for that. And he says to put that in place, it would require a referendum of the Ukrainian people. And for a referendum, it would require that they are free to vote in any way. And for that, it would require that all Russian forces pull out of Ukraine back to their positions on the 24th of February, which is the Russians would have to have a full retreat from Ukraine. So you can see these two positions. There's just not a middle ground between them at the moment. Now, of course, that's what negotiators try to work out. But it's such a massive middle ground. You have to look at this situation. And given what we've also heard from the Deputy Defense Minister in Kyiv today, saying that they still believe that Russia's trying to encircle the capital, despite what officials in Moscow are saying, that there is not a negotiated position or solution on the table at the moment. So these talks in Istanbul might help the humanitarian situation. President Macron in France has been trying to help get 150,000 people evacuated from Mariupol, one of the worst hit cities. That's, I think, where things are. It's a very, very long way from finding a negotiated peaceful solution at the moment, Becky.
Sure. I was with the French Foreign Minister in Doha this weekend at the Doha Forum. He described Mariupol as Europe's Aleppo, quite frankly. It's remarkable what's going on. Lest we forget, people are losing their lives on a daily basis in Ukraine at the moment. I have to ask you, how did President Putin's remarks about the Russian leader needing to go, President Putin needing to go, in his speech in Warsaw at the weekend, go down in the corridors of the buildings behind where you are, in the corridors of power in Europe? I know the White House has walked that back. They've said Joe Biden wasn't trying, and if I said President Putin, I meant Joe Biden, wasn't talking about regime change. But how did, this is being discussed as at least a gaffe by some and more by others.
Of course, there is a sense of concern that everything that President Biden has built in terms of unity, transatlantic alliance at NATO with European Union allies and partners is hugely important to maintain that unified position against Russia in terms of sanctions, in terms of military support, in terms of humanitarian support and helping refugees. So the unity is important. And the language that leaders use is important to keep that unity, that they're all aligned. And we heard President Macron over the weekend say, look, that's not the sort of language I would use. He said, essentially, we shouldn't be using language that potentially escalates the war or escalates tensions. And he made this point. He made the point that he said, look, I am still talking to President Putin. So that kind of language for me is not useful. He's talking to President Putin, perhaps more than any other European leader, and he's talking to President Zelensky, and it's all about trying to, you know, bring a peaceful solution, humanitarian corridors, if nothing else. But look at the two positions between the Elysee Palace, President Macron, and the White House, President Biden. The White House said at the outset, before the war began, that they would use diplomacy until the last moment when Russia invaded, and that would be it. President Macron at the moment says, I will use diplomacy to the last moment, and he means he's still continuing to use it. And as long as there's a conversation to be had with President Putin, he'll have it. So yes, you understand the two positions and the two sensibilities are in a different place. So the unity is important, the language is important, and President Biden's words, he knows, the White House knows, leaders here know, will be used by the Kremlin against them. And I think we've already got a sense of that from the Kremlin, saying they're not talking now about regime change in Kyiv either. They're spinning it back. They're playing it back. The Kremlin will get mileage out of this.
Nick Robertson is our international diplomatic editor. Always good to have you, Nick. Thank you. Well, just ahead on this show, I was in Doha in Qatar this weekend at a big meeting. The Qatari foreign minister was there, and he told me, and I quote here, we have to stick to international law. I've been speaking to him about his efforts to end the war in Ukraine. That interview is next.
My name is Vicky Chemtai. I'm a trade economist with the Trade and Regional Integration Unit of the World Bank. If we're to look at shipping as a country, it would be the 6th largest emitter of global emissions. So that's crazy massive. Restrictions on trading in environmental goods and services are standing in the way of making trade sustainable. You have less tariffs on dirty sectors, high tariffs on clean sectors. So what are the first steps that a country can take to make trade more sustainable? Definitely to reduce the tariffs and allowing a free flow of these low carbon technologies. Governments need to create this environment that enables innovation to thrive. This is critically important for the low carbon transition. There is absolutely no time to wait.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
Have you been bitten by the bug of curiosity? This is CNN 10. My name is Carl Azus. I'll be your explainer-in-chief.
Global news.
International relations are the key factors.
Relevant stories.
Everyday people whose action is changing their community.
Complex issues explained.
We're going back to the future.
And 10-second trivia.
You get a perfect 10 out of 10.
All in 10 minutes. Stream at cnn.com/CNN10.
You can help the refugees from Ukraine. Join the over 70,000 who've already raised millions for food, shelter, and more. Explore cnn.com/impact. Click to take action.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been appealing to parliaments around the world, calling for more help to fight the Russian invasion. And this weekend, he did the same at the Doha Forum, which I attended. Now, you won't be surprised to hear that the majority of the conversations there revolved around Russia's war on Ukraine. The EU's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, was there. He had some strong words when he compared Ukraine's Mariupol to Syria's Aleppo. And that's a comparison we are hearing a lot lately. Well, in response, Qatar's foreign minister says the response that we've seen from the international community is unprecedented, but reminding the audience that these atrocities have been happening in places in this region of the Middle East for decades. Well, I interviewed the foreign minister at the forum, and I started by asking him to be quite clear about what Qatar's stance is on this war. Take a listen.
Qatar's stand has been very, very clear. We are against any act of aggression or any threatening of use of power or the use of power against the sovereign country or trying to undermine the territorial integrity of any country. And we made this very clear. We have to stick to the international law and to the UN Charter, and this needs to be respected because otherwise the world will be in a chaos. So we keep our communication channel with all the parties. I was in Moscow approximately 10 days ago. I had the chance to have a conversation with the foreign minister of Russia, talking about the Ukrainian issue, but also keeping the communication ongoing with our Ukrainian counterparts, trying to help or offering our help or contribution to de-escalate the situation and put an end for this war.
Is it your sense that President Putin wants peace at this point?
Well, I cannot really say what President Putin is thinking about, but what I believe, and from my conversation with my counterpart there in Russia, that they are willing to engage on the demands that they have put forward. Now, how far the Ukrainian government are willing to give on those demands, this is really the Ukrainian government and Ukrainian people's decision. But our interest now is and the priority is really to create some safe environment for the people, for the civilians over there. There is a deterioration in the humanitarian situation in Ukraine, which is unprecedented. So I think that should be the priority. We should focus on having a ceasefire, humanitarian corridors, bringing the humanitarian assistance to Ukraine, and instead of having this conflict and disagreement in a battlefield to be around the table.
The West has imposed swingeing sanctions on Russia in an effort to squeeze the Kremlin at this point. The Qatar Investment Authority, or the QIE, has a sizable investment in the Russian oil giant Rosneft. Is Qatar prepared to withdraw from Russia? Do you unwind that position?
Well, actually, right now with the current situation, we are not thinking about any new investments there. Even, by the way, in Europe, until we have some clarity on the stability of the situation. But our decisions that we have took in the investment at that time was based on a commercial assessment. And these investments are still ongoing.
So you'll make no new investments
right now
in
in the current environment? I think that the investment is really under a lot of review.
The Norwegian Sovereign Fund has unwound its position in Russian companies. You're saying that Qatar investment in Russia is under review at this point?
For the current time, our investment decisions, as I told you, is based on commercial assessment, and what we have currently in Russia, we are not thinking about increasing that these days until we see a better atmosphere and more political stability.
You often play mediator. You have done throughout the Iran nuclear deal. Do you see yourselves continuing to mediate or play a mediation role? And if so, can you just explain what that is with regard to Russia, Ukraine?
Our world is interconnected. So whenever we see that we can offer our help and support for any efforts, we will not hesitate to make our offers. And this offer is extended to the Russians and to the Ukrainians in order to find a common ground and to put an end for this humanitarian catastrophe. And we will never give up on our efforts. It has been successful in several places. It didn't work well maybe in other places, but we have to continue to pursue that way. If no countries will adopt this view of shared responsibility and share the future of the world, then the world will be in a very difficult situation.
I want to talk about the Iran deal. You've played what seems to be a significant mediation role. Could I describe it as that? With regard Iran,
Well, Iran is our neighbor, and anything that happens or evolve over there, it definitely will affect us as Qatar, but will affect also the GCC countries. US is our ally, and we want to see an end for this JCPOA negotiation by bringing all the parties back to the JCPOA commitment, because this is something we see is very important for the region and for the stability of the region, and we don't want to see an arms race happening here. So we believe that the best way forward for them to get the parties back to the agreement. We are trying our best to use our contacts with Iran and with the US in order to bridge the gap between them and to reach an understanding. We are trying to help and to support the process. We are not effectively or officially a mediator, but we are trying to use our contacts with both countries in order to bring them closer.
The sticking points, it seems, are the lifting of economic sanctions at this point and the delisting of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards as a terror organization by the US State Department. Do you believe that that would be a smart move by the US?
Well, let us just distinguish between two things. The listing and delisting of terrorist organization will be based on the US assessment because it's a US listing. It's not the UN listing, which everyone is acknowledging and supporting. Regarding the economic sanctions, we as a small country, we never believe that economic sanctions or unilateral sanctions are an effective tool to change policies. And this has been very clear and principled position for us. So economic sanctions normally affecting the people, and punishing the people for policies of government, we don't see it as the right approach. So we believe that economic sanctions need to be lifted and the country needs a relief because of the people, and this is the livelihood of the Iranian people. It's not punishing a government and so on.
Do you see the Revolutionary Guards as a terror organization, a malign influence in this region? Would the delisting of that organization by the states, which is clearly a sticking point for the Iranians, be a good move or a bad move for regional stability?
Well, the IRGC is part of the Iranian government or Iranian official military structure. We should respect their structure. We should really talk about the actions that have been taken by certain forces here and there, and those actions, if they are like in the bad interest of the region or specific countries or targeting civilians or in any way, those actions need to be terrorized, but not just terrorizing an organization because of specific action by a smaller group of that.
President Raisi was here in Doha recently. Is it your sense that with or without a deal, Iran is looking for better relations in the region?
Well, this is what we are hearing all the time from the Iranian official. President Raisi, when he was here, he expressed his willingness to engage with the region and to have a better relation with the region, which is something we are very much welcoming here in Qatar. And we believe that a regional dialogue is necessary between the GCC and Iran in order to address the issues and the common concern. I'm sure that a lot of countries in the GCC have their own concerns about Iran, and Iran has some concerns also about some of the regional countries. We need to sit around the table and to understand each other and to build a common ground between the countries.
US officials cancelled planned meetings with the Taliban in Doha this weekend over the decision by the Taliban to not permit girls over the age of over grade 6 from actually attending school. Were you disappointed, and does this decision undermine your confidence, any confidence you have in their commitments and assurances?
Well, definitely this decision was very disturbing and disappointing for us, and we have expressed that publicly, and we are going to express that very firmly with them when we are talking with them. We believe engagement will remain very important to ensure that they revisit this decision and they allow the girls back to school. And we will keep the communication ongoing on that front. And we've been very firmly determined that they need to give all Afghans their rights of education, of going to workplace, of practicing their life freely.
Are they listening?
We hope so.
Qatari's foreign minister speaking to me in Doha over the weekend. Extremely important insight. Just ahead, an historic meeting in this part of the world. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken joining allies to tackle issues that just won't wait. We'll take a look at that next. Plus, Iran also on the agenda at that meeting. We are going to look at whether the US will drop its designation of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization. That is up next.
Gold in Jerusalem, and this is CNN.
Let me just get you, I want to get you to Antonio Guterres, who of course is the Secretary General of the United Nations. He has been talking for a period of time now, and I just want you to get a sense of what's going on here, because he is calling for what is an extremely important humanitarian corridor in Ukraine. Let's listen in.
To assert their right to use nuclear weapons if and when a scenario is required for such a move. We are also seeing reports of nuclear facilities in Ukraine being targeted by strikes. Are you concerned that we are now on the cusp of either a biological conflict here or a nuclear war?
Well, I was this morning in contact with the Director General of International Agency of International Atomic Energy Agency, and there will be a number of very important initiatives by IAEA in the next few days in order to guarantee the security of the nuclear facilities inside Ukraine. And I know that there is a very close contact of Rafael Grossi to both the Russian and the Ukrainian authorities on this, and he has my full support in the initiatives that we'll take in the next few days. On the other hand, I can't imagine the possibility of having a nuclear, a biological, or a chemical war in this scenario. That would be would be something that I believe will be avoided. It must be avoided.
Thank you. It's Pamela Falk from CBS News, Secretary General. Is there any reason you have to believe that a ceasefire is actually being agreed to by the two sides, by Russia in particular? And is there any way the UN can enforce that if a ceasefire comes into play? Thank you.
Well, as a matter of fact, I've been hearing in different positions taken by both the Ukrainians and the Russian Federation in the motion that was presented to the Security Council, reference to a ceasefire. So I think this is the moment in which I believe it makes sense for the UN to assume the initiative. And of course, it depends on the will of the parties when a ceasefire is established to define the arrangements necessary to make the ceasefire persist.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Right, that is the Secretary General of the United Nations. Really important stuff there. Just reinforcing the importance of a humanitarian ceasefire, a humanitarian corridor for those who are in such need in Ukraine at present. More, of course, as we get it on that, and we hope that the talks that will be going on Tuesday in Turkey will also address that humanitarian corridor. All right. Well, we will work together to confront security challenges, including those from Iran. That's a declaration coming from America's top diplomat. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken expected in the Moroccan capital of Rabat around now. Before that, he was in Israel. That was just a few hours ago, speaking to reporters at the end of, and I cannot underline what I mean when I say, an historic meeting. He stood alongside the foreign ministers in Israel, the foreign ministers of Israel and 4 Arab nations: Morocco, the UAE, where I am based, Bahrain, and Egypt. This meeting again in Israel. They discussed crucial topics, including Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine and the Iran nuclear deal. Both topics that, of course, we discussed with the Qatari foreign minister, if you were with us just 5 or 6 minutes ago. Blinken also condemning Sunday's deadly shooting in the Israeli city of Hadar, which is about an hour's drive from Tel Aviv. ISIS has claimed responsibility for that attack that left 2 people dead. Well, the Secretary of State did not leave Israel without having a conversation with the Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett on Sunday, who has since tested positive for COVID-19. A lot to unpick here. Let's bring in journalist Elliot Gotkin live in Jerusalem. And I just want to begin with this meeting. I've said it twice. This was an historic summit, the Negev summit, as it's being slugged. Just explain for the benefit of our viewers who may not be as immersed in the politics of this region as you and I are, Elliot, just how significant this getting together of those stakeholders was.
Becky, I think US Secretary of State Antony Blinken summed it up by saying that the once impossible things have become possible. I mean, this would have been impossible just a couple, 2-3 years ago. Imagine talking about these ministers, these foreign ministers, along with the US Secretary of State, getting together at all, let alone getting together in Israel. And it was really quite astonishing to see them all lined up there, one by one, each taking their turn to speak to the journalists there and to really talk about the collaboration and the cooperation that both this Negev summit is about, and of course that the Abraham Accords that kind of paved the way for this summit to take place are about as well. And I mean, look, there weren't any lofty goals, I don't think, that people expected, concrete achievements to come out of this summit. They did agree to kind of make it a permanent forum, so they are going to keep talking at the foreign ministry level, and they've got professional working groups there. I suppose the fact that this meeting took place was perhaps the biggest achievement. After that, it gave the US an opportunity to reconnect with its allies, to show its commitment to the region, to its allies, to the Abraham Accords, and also to assuage assuage any fears and concerns that they may have about the, as it seems likely, the US rejoining the Iran nuclear agreement. And after speaking with one of the officials in the room, I understand they're also talking about ways of how to deter Iran and its proxies from destabilizing the region. So talking about security at a kind of regional level as well. But as you say, Becky, an historic meeting and really quite astonishing scenes to see all of those ministers lined up next to one another.
Yeah, and ISIS claiming responsibility for an attack that happened, at the same time as this meeting was taking place, that left 2 people dead. Regional security, of course, uppermost in the minds of those who were gathered, and condemnation for that attack in Israel from all parties who were present. Thank you. Iran, high on the agenda, both there and as the US Secretary of State continues his regional visit. The issue of delisting the Iranian Revolutionary Guards as a terror organization is front and center. This has become the main sticking point in talks to revive the Iran nuclear deal. For nearly a year, the world has waited for the outcome of these negotiations that could see Iran roll back its nuclear program in return for sanctions relief. But those talks in Vienna were paused on March the 11th amid changing geopolitical dynamics following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Look, Iran still says a deal is close. The EU's top foreign policy official also sounding optimistic over the weekend in Doha, saying a deal could happen in a matter of days. But the US is sounding a more pessimistic tone. Washington's chief nuclear negotiator, Rob Malley, telling me over the weekend that a deal is not around the corner.
And so you could be close for a very long time and you could never get there. So I would say the deal is not just around the corner and it's not inevitable.
All right, the reason has to do with the IRGC, the elite military wing, the Guards, designated a foreign terrorist organization by the Trump administration in 2019 as part of its maximum pressure campaign. Now, Iran demands the organization must be removed from the list. Iran's former foreign minister, Kamal Karachi, told me the same.
IRGC certainly has to be removed from the list. And that's not the only problem. We have around 500 people and institutions sanctioned by the United States. And all of these, or part of these, have direct economic impact on relation between Iran and Western countries.
Let's be quite frank here. The US is obviously considering such a move, but that wouldn't be an end to sanctions on the group.
Regardless of the outcome on the question of the IRGC, which I won't address, I can tell you that the IRGC will remain sanctioned under US law, and our perception, our views, our policy towards the IRGC will not have changed.
The EU coordinator for the talks visited Tehran on Sunday in an effort to close those gaps. What message he carries to Washington could seal the deal in a matter of days or continue this cycle of escalation with Tehran. We will stay on this story for you and bring you all the analysis you need. I'm Becky Anderson with Connect the World. Up next. The biggest story at the Oscars wasn't who won or lost. It was what happened when one movie star heard a joke that went too far. The story of the superstar slap when we come back.
We and other companies out there, and the biggest meat and egg and dairy companies, and the biggest food manufacturers in the world, need to make it easy for people to eat well. And And that hasn't been the case for the last 50 years. We've made it really hard to eat well. And for us to build a better, more sustainable food system, that has to happen. But while that's happening, people can still choose to eat better. We can all consciously think about the everyday choices that we make to build a healthier food system. You can be an environmentalist. You can be someone that cares about a sustainable food system and not always eat perfectly. And if we and other companies, and I think the world out there, strive just to be a little bit better every single day, a little bit better every single day adds up. There's a compounding interest to being a little bit better every single day. And that's how I think we're going to build a food system we can be really proud of.
Well, it was, of course, one of the biggest awards show on the planet, but overshadowed Sunday night by an altercation between two Hollywood superstars. I'm talking the Oscars here. Comedian Chris Rock was on stage as a presenter, and he cracked a joke about Will Smith's wife, Jada, and her hair loss. Well, Smith got up from his seat, walked up on stage, and slapped Rock across the face. Smith also cursed at Rock and said he didn't want to hear the comedian say his wife's name ever again. Well, look, all of this happened live with millions of people watching on TV. If you didn't see it, have a look at this.
Uh-oh, Richard! Oh, wow! Wow! Will Smith...
Ooh, moments later, in the show, Will Smith won his first Oscar, the Best Actor award for a leading role for his performance in King Richard. During his acceptance speech, he apologized for his role in, call it, the incident, and ended by saying he hopes the Academy welcomes him back.
I want to apologize to the Academy. I want to apologize to all my fellow nominees. Art imitates life. I look like the crazy father, just like